Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, he had his favourite mode of communication briefly silenced last night when a rogue Twitter employee deleted the president's account. But Donald Trump was well and truly back online this morning, firing off a barrage of tweets attacking the Democrats. For the next 2 weeks, he'll be tweeting while travelling on a tour of Asia. And all the while, the probe into his campaign's contacts with Russia continues in Washington. The latest scrutiny is aimed at the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, as our Washington correspondent Kylie Morris reports.
As he left for his longest overseas trip yet, President Donald Trump may have welcomed the chance to leave Washington behind in the storm over his campaign team's alleged contacts with Russia. But even as he left the White House, he couldn't avoid the questions.
I don't remember much about that meeting. It was a very unimportant meeting, took place a long time. Don't remember much about it.
He's referring to this meeting with George Papadopoulos. The former campaign aide says he offered to arrange a meeting between candidate Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Papadopoulos has pleaded guilty to lying initially to the FBI and has since cooperated with special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation.
Have you talked to President Trump since your indictment?
Another former Trump associate in Mueller's sights, former campaign manager Paul Manafort. Manafort and his associate Rick Gates have pleaded not guilty to money laundering, tax fraud and failing to register as foreign agents of Ukraine's pro-Russian political faction. Now it's the president's Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, in the spotlight. He's facing calls from Democrats to appear before Congress to clarify his previous testimony in which he denied knowledge of contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian officials.
I have never met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. Further, I have no knowledge of any such conversations by anyone connected to the Trump campaign.
It's now been revealed not only was he present at the meeting with Papadopoulos, but another former campaign advisor, Carter Page, who testified before the House Intelligence Committee yesterday, says he mentioned to Jeff Sessions he was travelling to Russia during the 2016 campaign.
Well, I'm joined now by that former Trump campaign advisor you saw at the end of Kylie's report, Carter Page. And your latest testimony appears to contradict the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, when he claimed he knew nothing about contacts between the Trump campaign and Russia. Why are you dropping him in it now?
I'm not dropping him in anything. It's so funny that this is a spin coming out of a 8-hour meeting that I had at the House Intelligence Committee. A couple of people pick a couple of words out of context completely and make a made-up story out of it.
Well, you say you told him you were going to Russia, and he said he didn't know anything about meetings between Trump campaign people and Russians. I mean, the two things are at odds.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not at all at odds. Number one, I was going there. I've been speaking at. I've been a professor and a scholar in international relations. I've spoken at Moscow universities for the last couple of decades. So I was going there as a private individual. I was not there representing the Trump campaign at all. And the only mention I noted during my 8-hour conversation with them yesterday is as we were walking out the door one time, at the only time I've ever met then Senator Sessions, was I just mentioned that it was nice to have met you. I'm glad I was able to stop by, and because I'm just heading to Moscow in a couple of days, totally unrelated to the campaign.
It's pretty awkward though.
It was nice to meet. It was nice to meet you.
Some people think you've been put up to it deliberately.
The only thing awkward. No, the only thing awkward are the complete lies that were said against the campaign. Coming from this dodgy dossier, which was originated in the UK by some consultants.
This was the Steele dossier that had all sorts of lurid allegations in it, about Donald Trump.
Completely outrageous allegations, which have been completely debunked in the months since, particularly about me. I mean, it's so made up, it's ridiculous.
Well, let me just ask you some basic questions.
There's a phrase,
Did you ever talk to Russians of any description about Hillary Clinton's emails or any kind of dirt about Hillary Clinton?
Absolutely no dirt. No dirt. The only dirt I heard was on TV. The things I heard was what you were hearing.
Did you talk to them about the election at all?
News.
And about helping Trump win?
To say, never about helping Trump win. If anything, I was hurting Trump's chances. I was a junior volunteer just helping out, and people this big money dossier that was funded by major donors, plutocrats from the U.S., from the then candidate Trump's opposition. They were
so you did talk about Hillary
all
Clinton.
Kinds of money to come up with this. I have no recollection. My point is, it may have come, her name may have come up at some point, but it was in the news. It's like you talking about Brexit. To say a year ago you never talked about Brexit is difficult to say.
Okay, you've been cooperating with the FBI, haven't you?
Completely.
So have you offered to wear a wire or anything like that since you have been?
That's a funny question. Can
I have an answer?
It's so outrageous. Well, of course not. Everything, when I started talking to them, and it was disclosed that I was talking to them. Usually I don't talk about confidential conversations like that, but someone leaked it to the Washington Post. So I will confirm, which was leaked by someone to the Washington Post, that I had discussions with them earlier this year in March. And everything that we talked about, particularly about the dodgy dossier, I think pretty quickly they realized what a complete joke it was.
But you were a foreign affairs advisor, and so was Mr. Papadopoulos, who has admitted lying about to the FBI about his contacts with the Russians. Now, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the president's press spokesman, says that he was kind of nobody. He didn't count. Is that true?
I met him briefly, right when it was a growing team. People continued from in the foreign policy realm, continued to join the campaign over time. I was one of the early informal volunteers, which was part of this committee. You mentioned that meeting on March 31. I was meeting with some U.S. military senior officers, thousands of miles from Washington.
I'm just wondering how important he was, because the White House is trying to say he was nothing, he was insignificant. Were you and him just insignificant?
I'm very significant in that all these lies from the dodgy dossier started coming out against me about 45 days or so before the election. That, if you want to talk about influence on the election, that's the major impact. And also, which has been disclosed, you want to talk about this term, quote unquote, collusion. There was a ton of that going on between, allegedly, between the associates of Steele and the information and the
you've been really
intelligence services,
and you've done lots of television interviews because you say you want the truth to come out. Isn't it possible that you weren't part of a conspiracy, but you were being used? You were being played by the Russians. You were part of a conspiracy. You just didn't realize.
Nothing they ever asked me to do, nothing I ever said to them was material in any way. The only conspiracy, the only thing that's been very well proved, particularly given recent evidence that's come out over the last several days, is the fact that there's big money from major donors of the Democratic Party funding this dossier, and that in turn was used for surveillance against me. Yes.
Carter Page, thank you very much for joining us again. Thank you.
But let's go to America now, and leaving behind many of the controversies he is fighting off at home, like the issue of Russia and the impact it may or may not have had on the presidential election, Donald Trump set off on his marathon visit to Asia today. There is, of course, one major problem he'll be walking right into on his 11-day tour of the Far East: what to do about North Korea. But as he was setting off to deal with all that, his final thoughts were on the terror attack in New York.
This lengthy trip to Asia is the most diplomatically challenging of his presidency. But as he left the White House, Donald Trump was first vowing vengeance not on North Korea, but on ISIS, following the terrorist attack in New York.
When we have an animal do an attack like he did the other day on the west side of Manhattan, we are hitting them 10 times harder. They claimed him as a soldier. Good luck. Every time they hit us, we know it's ISIS. We hit them like you folks won't believe. Thank you.
But his 12-day trip to Asia is going to be dominated by the issue of North Korea and how he proposes to disarm Kim Jong-un. There are some reports circulating that the North Korean leader may seek to disrupt Trump's visit to the region by launching fresh missile tests. The Trump administration has repeatedly warned that the window for a diplomatic solution is quickly closing, although a military option would almost certainly escalate into a potentially catastrophic regional conflict. Trump's national security advisor says it's not the president who is risking war.
I've been aware of the discussions about, hey, is this inflammatory? No, what's inflammatory is the North Korean regime and what they're doing to threaten the world. I think there would be a grave danger if that regime didn't understand our resolve, the president's resolve to counter North Korean aggression.
For analysts, that sort of talk is deeply alarming.
I would hope it's bluster. I think there's a growing fear among many of us who follow this that Trump is seriously considering it. And McMaster keeps talking about this. There is no military option unless you're prepared to accept the deaths of tens and perhaps hundreds of thousands of people.
But the president does have two relationships in Asia that he believes to be strong.
Please, look at me.
He has forged a close bond with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. They've even become golfing partners.
Thank you, everybody.
And Trump is also relying on a relationship he has nurtured with President Xi of China. The two leaders will debate both trade issues and how best to contain North Korea. This is a trip that will see him meeting with strong allies, economic rivals, and notably, a number of Asia's most authoritarian leaders. Robert Moore, News at 10, Washington.
And let's chat to our correspondent, Debbie Edward in Beijing. Now, Debbie, Robert was talking about some of the leaders there, but this is a tricky visit for Donald Trump. He doesn't particularly get on with the South Korean leader, does he? And as for President Duterte of the Philippines, I remember you very memorably reporting on his policy on drug addicts and drug dealers, controversial to say the very least. How do you think this visit is going to go?
Well, there is a great deal of expectation and no small measure of intrepidation here in Asia. This is a US president who came into office and torpedoed the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a free trade pact in the region, and then started stoking tensions with North Korea, labelling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man. President Trump is going to be met with large protests in South Korea, where he is described as the war-mongering president. It will be North Korea, as Robert says, which dominates this visit. But the two most anticipated meetings, perhaps, are between President Duterte in the Philippines and President Xi Jinping here in China. Donald Trump describes his president-to-president relationship with Xi Jinping as the best there is, and that will certainly be how it appears on camera. But behind the scenes, the two men have some tough talking to do on North Korea and a trade deficit which Donald Trump has described as embarrassing and horrible. Then at the end of his trip comes that meeting with President Duterte in the Philippines, a president who has sanctioned the deaths of thousands of drug users and drug dealers. So it will be interesting to see how Donald Trump navigates that particular diplomatic meeting.
OK, Debbie, the best there is. Let's see how that goes. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, talking of President Trump, next Wednesday marks a year since he was elected. So we thought it would be a good idea, with my esteemed colleagues here, to take a look at his first year in numbers and get our guests to give him an end-of-year report. In the past 12 months, Donald Trump sent 2,328 tweets, gaining an average of 66,000 followers a day. There have been around 1.2 million jobs created so far, though that's a slower rate, I should say, than Barack Obama's final year in office. He's also had 72 golf trips. Not bad by anyone's standards. Harry Cole, how is he doing domestically? Is he making much change?
No. He promised the world and he failed to deliver. If anything, the Trump presidency has restored my faith in America, because their beautifully designed political system that has lasted 200 years and puts ours to shame in many ways, although it did kind of rip off lots of other things. He's unable to do anything. The checks and balances are brilliant. The Senate stop everything. The House stop everything. Well, the judges stop everything. At the end of the day, the power of the US president relies on him being an excellent politician and being able to manage the three separate bits of power in America. And he seems, at the moment, incapable of that. And in my view, generally, politicians being unable to make laws tends to stop them doing some daft things.
So, C-, D+?
3 out of 10 and see me.
OK, see you. More work to do. Susie Boniface, internationally, Donald Trump, how's he doing on that front?
Well, Russia thinks he's great. North Korea thinks he's good fun, it seems.
I'm not sure.
And I think probably most of the world regards him as an entertainment value thing rather than someone who can possibly help them. He's very much America first, international trade, tariffs, diplomacy has all gone out the window. He's, regressing and retreating back into America and pulling Americans back from overseas. So I think generally the grade for him internationally would be more of a narrative thing as just sad.
And of course, the eyes will be on him when he comes to the UK, as we understand it, next year. Not quite in the way we thought.
The eggs will be on him when he comes to the UK.
The eggs?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Right.
British tradition, I understand.
Prediction
Not that I'm
there.
encouraging anybody.
During this period in office then, June, has he made America great?
No, he's made America hate again. That's what he's done. I think he's divided the country even more. I think it's a disaster. It's worse than we even thought it was going to be. And I'm sorry, there isn't even a letter in the alphabet to grade him on.
Although at the same time, he feels he's getting all this support, all these followers.
Where?
Harry, I mean, he's buoyed in himself. I know that when people were on that election night, you were at a party, weren't you? I mean, there was a huge establishment fallout, wasn't there?
It was an extraordinary moment where suddenly people realised quite what was going to happen, and they weren't going to get their own way, and it was going to be terrible. Despite everything they tried to do, every piece of mud that had been slung for that campaign over 2 years, suddenly it was real. And I don't think large swathes of America and large swathes of the American establishment and the media establishment across the pond have got over that yet. They need to get over that soon, or it's just going to lather itself into hysteria for another 3 years.
Susie, do you think if he run again, if there was another election right now, he'd win?
Yes, I think we've probably got 8 years of Trump.
8?
I can see it happening, but because the Democrats simply won't have someone there in place to take him on who is as good as he is at what he is doing in way of controlling and manipulating the media and the narrative.
So what's your score? Are you giving him out of 10? Are we doing it out of 10?
What are you grading him on exactly? I mean, in terms of being a giant walking what's-it who's an idiot, he's a 10 out of 10. On the scales of being a president who can achieve and do the things he's promised, he's a minus 70,000.
OK. I'm not getting any. I'm not getting any good scores here. June Sarpong, you said he made America hate again. What are you giving him out of 10?
0. And actually, I'm not sure if he will win next time. He only won by 70,000 votes this time, and all he's done is rev up his base. So I'm not convinced he'll win.
I think he'll have a crack at it if he thinks he can, but I think he'll know quite early on if he's going to, because the one thing he'll want to go on his own terms. He'll want to go on his own, and one thing he doesn't want to do
but the midterms will tell us. Next year we'll know.
We'll know more.